I, it's an immense pleasure to have you here on our platform of Voice for India. He's a renowned politician from Odisha, currently serving as BJP National Vice President and spokesperson. Voice for India extends a gracious welcome to you, sir. Delighted to have you here with us and would like to have hear from you.
Thank you very much. Uh, am I visible and audible clearly?
Yeah, sir. You are
Yes,
visible.
Yes, sir, you are.
Thank you. It's a pleasure indeed to be here at this virtual event organized by Voice for India. I just caught the last few words of my good friend, Shri Suresh Prabhuji, who is also one of our most intellectual, passionate, and principled politicians, not just in my party, but in the nation. I have been asked to touch upon 3 topics in my talk. One is whether the ban on a certain number of Chinese apps is justified. Second is whether our lockdown was properly planned or unplanned, as some opponents are alleging. And the third topic is whether the floods in Bihar and Assam indicate a continued failure of governance, or are they a permanent feature of natural disasters that we face? So I will address all of these things in the next 14 to 15 minutes. When we come to the apps issue, I am a very strong supporter of the action taken by the Indian government, but I want to clarify something. This is, in principle, I support openness and I support free markets, and I support more global interaction and trade. So the question arises why I'm supporting this. Because free trade and investment, foreign investment from other countries, is supposed to help foster good relations and friendship and commercial ties. There are a lot of theories which have talked about how when 2 countries have a lot of economic ties, then there is less chance of conflict. But that has been disproven in this case. There are a few exceptions, and this is one of the exceptions. We know how China has behaved. Of course, this year, very egregious behavior where they have tried to violate the line of actual control, and it has led to conflict with loss of lives of both sides, and 20 brave Indian armed forces personnel have sacrificed themselves. But also for several years, China has used its increased size and economic clout to be a patron for rogue states which foster terrorism and which have been directly attacking India. So it is irrational to continue having this kind of trade and economic ties with somebody who, instead of being a partner, is being bent on being an adversary, trying to undermine us. This is the country that is misusing its position in the Security Council in the United Nations to give shelter to terrorists, both individual terrorists as well as terrorist organizations who should be banned, and many of them are banned, but others are getting protection because of China's influence. There is also a very severe cybersecurity threat, because China has been using cyber warfare as one aspect of its hostile actions against many countries. And by the way, India is not the only country. China has been hostile to Japan, to Vietnam, to Philippines, to Indonesia, to US interests. So more and more countries are beginning to speak out. So it is basically irrational to give the economic aid to those who are using that to counter us, because our balance of trade with China is in China's favor. So every time there is trade, China gains more than we do. Of course, we have to correct our own shortcomings so that we can have better, more efficient manufacturing and services and agriculture sector. But the fact is, as long as the balance of trade is in their favor, and they continue, it would not matter if they were a friendly country. But since they are actively hostile, it is just irrational that we should continue to support that effort. And other countries are beginning to do the same. You can see that US has also given a warning on TikTok, and there are other nations looking at the data security threat from using Chinese apps. So I have no problem in generally supporting free trade, in generally supporting openness, in generally supporting foreign direct investment. But there have to be exceptions when a country is exceptionally hostile and is undermining our national interest. Number two, on the lockdown, yes, it is true that some segments of the opposition, particularly one party and one misguided leader of that party, has been continuously attacking the government of India, the Modi government's approach on the lockdown, calling it unplanned. But it is absolutely untrue. For one reason, you can see that the rest of the world is complimenting India. It is cheering what India has done and is noting the success of what India has done. So remember something, in March, many epidemiologists were predicting that India would collapse because of the coronavirus pandemic, as many first world countries in Europe had a collapse of their health system, which was supposed to be much more robust than India's. But if you look at what has actually happened, they had predicted that within few months, India would have 500 million infections, that is 50 crore infections, and would have something like 2 million deaths. But we have done far better than that. Our infections are in less than 3 million rather than 500 million, and deaths are around less than 50,000 rather than 20 lakhs. Now, any death is terrible, and the loss to the economy is very serious, and we have to deal with that. But the fact is, India has done outstandingly well compared to every other country. And the most fundamental metric is the fatalities per population, and we are the lowest in that for a variety of reasons. We have shown that we are very good at reacting and ramping up to the challenge. For example, at the beginning, there was no capacity in India to manufacture PPE kits or ventilators. That changed within 2 months. But even before that changed, India had prepared 150,000 hospital beds dedicated to COVID. It had something like 20,000 ventilators already lined up for the eventuality. And for most of the country, that never came to pass. There were a few hotspots. For example, Delhi came to a point where hospital beds were running out until the Home Minister got involved and took some drastic decisions and sorted out the matter within a few days. And within a few weeks, Delhi has completely turned around, and there is enough huge surplus of hospital beds available for COVID patients, and so on and so forth. The main thing to keep in mind is, and this is the lie that this particular opposition leader points out, is that it was unplanned. The reality is the Prime Minister has done a phenomenal job of leading and communicating and planning our tackling of this pandemic, which has hit every country in the world. Remember something, India was one of the first countries to stop flights from China right in the second week of January, as soon as it became officially acknowledged that there was a major virus emerging from China. Also remember, India was one of the earliest to set up the highest level monitoring body monitored by the Prime Minister's office, again at that time, so from early January. And it has been meeting and reviewing on a daily basis. Also remember, the Prime Minister himself has had many rounds of video conference discussions with chief ministers around the country. Also, the Cabinet Secretary has had similar virtual discussions around the country with chief secretaries and with other relevant officials. Now, a lot of this happened before the lockdown. So before the lockdown, many rounds of such discussions took place, having them on board. Remember, the Prime Minister communicated, and we had a trial run. We had a one-day lockdown to get people acquainted and acclimatized to this. Because remember, as the world's largest and most diverse democracy, we are not a totalitarian government where the national government will just issue an order and things happen. Those things can happen in dictatorships, in totalitarian regimes like China and other such countries. But that's not how democracies work. In democracies, you have to persuade people. And the Prime Minister showed that he did a phenomenal job of repeatedly communicating, coming on television, and getting people to buy into the concept of using masks, the concept of maintaining physical distancing. And that is the major reason why we have done so well, relatively well, compared to other countries. And similar steps are now being taken to deal with the economic harm that the pandemic has caused. Again, it has caused it to every country in the world. And India has also been very early and coming out with the stimulus package, which is one of the largest in the world. And we will see the impact of that going forward. That brings me to the third point, that do the floods in Bihar and Assam indicate a continued failure of governance, or whether this is a natural disaster which is permanent in nature? So let me tell you, I come from that part of the world. I come from Odisha, which has natural disasters almost every year. So we have floods almost every alternate year, and we have a lot of similar problems. And I have personally dealt with floods by doing extensive relief work for a very long time. So I can speak with experience. The reality is that certain parts of the world are naturally more prone, but there is also a governance angle to it. So countries like Bangladesh, for instance, and the eastern coast of India are susceptible to cyclones on a much more frequent basis than if you compare to many other parts of the world, even to other parts of India. Even if you compare to other parts of India, the eastern coast has much more frequency of very high strength cyclones and thunderstorms and other natural disasters which lead to flooding. Now, we see that in Bangladesh all the time. You see it every year on the east coast, if not in Odisha or Assam or Bihar, then in Andhra Pradesh or Tamil Nadu, and so on and so forth. But the reality also is that there is a governance angle to it, because it has to do with infrastructure. So in Odisha, we had this is worth sharing. In 1999, we had a huge super cyclone which killed 11,000 people. But we have had similar or nearly similar strength of cyclones since then. But the deaths are much lower, for example, because hundreds of shelters were built. These are concrete schools come cyclone shelters. Many of them were donated by other states. Some of them were donated by parliamentarians' MP-led schemes, where special sanction was given for MPs from all over the country to donate to Odisha. Then many other practices were put into place, such as early evacuation as soon as there is a meteorological department warning of a cyclone approaching, which will inevitably lead to floods. So early evacuation to these shelters has played a huge role, so that today a similar category of cyclones hardly leads to just a few 3 or 4 deaths rather than 11,000 deaths. So this is one example of how governance can change. Now, these infrastructures can't be built overnight. So we need lots of, not only cyclone shelters, we need bridges, we need distributed storage of medicines and food. We need the state level versions of the disaster management, relief and rescue teams, the rapid action forces, which have been trained for rescuing people in waterlogged areas, which have been trained to deal with power lines which have fallen down and which are live. A lot of people get electrocuted. They have been trained to cut trees which have fallen and blocked roads to remove them. They're trained to do many other such things. So those states which have not done so can't instantly, there is no switch you can flip so that instantly a state becomes more capable of dealing with floods and with cyclones. So states, Assam had a long period of governance by a particular party and they did not do it. So if you start building infrastructure now, I'm afraid it takes time. You cannot just build that kind of infrastructure in 6 months or 1 year or even 2 years. So you have to have a decade-long plan to build that kind of infrastructure for evacuation, for rescue, relief, and rehabilitation efforts. But we have to recognize that these areas also have much more chances of facing such natural disaster. So the reality is that governance does play a role, and you will see the difference, the kind of importance that the Modi government is giving to areas which have long been neglected. You look at the Northeast. So railway connectivity ought to have been a basic requirement, basic infrastructure. That was not there until the Modi government started pushing it, and you started getting railway connectivity to places like Tripura for the very first time. So infrastructure plays a very big role in the governance aspect of it. And I'm very confident that in the coming 5 to 10 years, you will see dramatic improvement in the capacity of many of these states to deal with the unfortunate situation that they have a higher likelihood of facing natural disasters. So with that, I will bring my discussion to a close. I've pointed out why I generally favor openness in investment and trade, but on the issue of Chinese apps, it is absolutely rational to take the steps that the government of India has taken. I have pointed out why India's lockdown was, in fact, one of the best planned and best implemented around the world. You listen to public health experts. Don't listen to politicians with a vested interest, and they will keep telling you this. And third thing, I have commented that the floods in Assam and Bihar, yes, indeed, they are more or less permanent feature because of the geography of that region. But there is a governance aspect which is a backlog, because you can't just do governance of disaster management without infrastructure, which should have been built 20 years, 30 years, 40 years ago. They will be done now, and you will see the future impact of better management of these crises due to better infrastructure, which is a result of better governance. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to speak on this occasion, on this great day, which is our Independence Day. Thank you very much. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.